Several weeks ago, I put out a video about the 30 songs that I sing at my church, and I realized, because of some of the comments on that video, that maybe it's kind of crazy to only sing 30 songs at your church. And so in this video, I just wanted to briefly explain why we only have 30 songs in our worship song repertoire, and maybe you can determine for yourself, do I need more songs, or maybe do you need to cut some songs? And if you want to see that video about the 30 songs I sing at my church, I'll link it down in the description below, and you can see all the songs that I'm singing at my church right now. So here's the first reason, and probably honestly the biggest reason that I'm only singing 30 songs at my church right now, and that is because we just went through the process of cutting out, I want to say a bunch of songs. It probably wasn't a bunch of songs, but it was probably, 15, 20 songs maybe. And I guess ultimately my goal is not just to sing 30 songs forever. Like, I'm not like, there's a hard cap at 30 and we can never go over that. I think I could probably bump it up to 60 at some point, like literally double the amount of songs that we sing at my church, and it'll be okay. But I'm sure the question you're asking is, why did you cut songs out? And I'll give a few reasons. And the first is that I was trying to decide what songs work best in my church, and I serve in an older traditional congregation for the most part. That doesn't mean that we never do any more modern songs, but whether they're, age-wise older, speaking of songs here, age-wise older or newer, I just found out that what works in my church are hymn-like songs. So that could be old hymns, or that could be more modern hymns like songs by the Gettys or Matt Papa and Matt Boswell. But because of that discovery, and that's not like something that I just arrived at one day and was like, oh, this makes sense. It was like a process of probably the past 2 years of me trying different songs and seeing how people responded in my church. And it was just like every time we sing, because it's not just me singing, but every time our church sings a hymn-like song, whether that's a traditional hymn or a modern hymn, that's when people truly engage in corporate singing. And that's my goal as a worship leader, is I want to help people engage as a musical worship leader. I want to help people engage in corporate singing. That is my purpose on Sunday morning. And I know that there's, we're glorifying God, edifying each other, so on and so forth. But practically speaking, I want people to sing. And so I want to pick songs that facilitate that singing. And for my specific church, that means singing hymn-like songs. I'm not saying that you have to do that at your church, obviously. We all serve in our own context. So that's the first reason I cut some songs. The second reason, though, is that I've kind of gone through, I'll call it a theological development in my understanding of corporate worship, and specifically music in the worship service. And well, I mean, not just music, but really the totality, if you've been watching my channel, the totality of what I believe about the purpose of corporate worship. As I look at the Bible, I look at things and I say, this is the purpose of us gathering together. And what I realized is that some of the songs that we were singing did not serve that function, and they existed in a theology outside of my current understanding of what we're supposed to be doing as worship leaders functioning in a corporate gathering, or as a church functioning in a corporate gathering. And I guess I'll just name names. It's not going to be a surprise. I talked about it in that video about the 30 songs. I cut Bethel, Elevation, Hillsong songs from my repertoire. And we didn't have like a ton of those, but obviously, we had, that's what I cut. So I cut probably 15, 20 Bethel, Hillsong, Elevation songs. And I don't know if you guys can guess. You can guess why I cut those songs. It's not a secret. I don't have like some amazing reason outside of what you've probably heard a million times, and I'm sure some of you agree, some of you disagree. But I came to the conclusion that their theology of worship is not my theology of worship. The songs that they sing are designed to function within their theology of corporate worship. That's not how I want to function in corporate worship. That's not how I think that the church should function in corporate worship. Therefore, I'm not going to use those songs, because those songs are designed to facilitate that goal, which 100% makes sense. If that's your theology of worship, I don't see why you wouldn't sing those songs, but that's not my theology of worship, and I'm not going to go like into super detail in this video, because that's not really what this video is about. But yeah, that's not my theology of worship. I'm going to sing songs that prop up my my understanding of what a biblical theology of corporate worship looks like. And so, simply put, the first reason that we only have 30 songs right now at my church is because I cut out a bunch of songs. Now, the second reason is more of a practical reason, and that is because that I've found that fewer songs equals more engagement in corporate worship. So it's not just the kind of songs that we sing and what resonates with our church, which, by the way, isn't necessarily the litmus test. Like, I'm not just trying to get people to sing in church. I don't know if I communicated it that way or not. I'm not just trying to get people to sing in my church. I want the songs that we sing to be theological, and honestly, at the end of the day, if everybody hated the songs that we did, but they really liked songs with horrible theology that didn't serve the function of what I see biblically as the purpose of a corporate worship gathering, I wouldn't do those songs. So my goal, I guess, isn't necessarily just to make people sing. It's to be biblically faithful. But engagement is important because we are called to teach and admonish one another. And so I want people to be able to do that. One of the ways that I found that that can happen in the church is to shrink your song list. Some people are doing 125 songs. I talked to some worship leaders. They're like, we did 200 songs last year. I'm like, maybe that works for your church. Maybe your church can learn that many songs. But just take stock. If you are singing new songs every single Sunday and you look out at your congregation and people aren't singing, perhaps the reason is not that they don't like the songs. Perhaps the reason is not that they don't want to sing. Perhaps the reason is not that they don't love Jesus. Perhaps the reason is not that the key of the song is wrong. Perhaps the reason is that you sing way too many songs. Just think about that. Is that true in my case? And you serve in your own church. You get to determine how many songs are appropriate for your church to have in their repertoire. And maybe your church can handle 200 songs. I have never found that to be the case in the churches that I've served at. So, like I said, I have it at 30 right now. I could probably bump it up to 60 at some point. I think for me, and maybe I'll find differently, I think for me, like that's the cap that I see in my church. And so I just encourage you, if your church isn't engaging in worship and you print out your report from Planning Center, or you just look at how many songs you have on your song list and it's like 158 songs, there's your problem, potentially. Now, the third reason I only sing 30 songs at my church is because I do not feel any pressure to constantly introduce new songs. And I mean that in two ways. First of all, I mean that in the way that I don't feel like, oh, we've been singing these 30 songs for the past 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, and we just really need a new song right now to freshen things up. That thought process doesn't resonate with me. I don't want to sing the same 30 songs forever in my church, but we're going to talk about this later. I want to pick really strong theological songs that will stand the test of time. And guess what? If songs stand the test of time, then, and I'm only going to sing potentially 60 songs in my church, then at some point it's going to be like, we have this amazing set of songs. I'm not saying I'll never introduce a new song, but I don't need to just get on this routine of, well, we've got to introduce the new song of the month. I've never done that. I introduce a new song when it has a specific reason to be introduced. If I recognize that there's like some hole in the theology of our worship repertoire, like some theological aspect of what we should be singing about that we're not singing about, I'll introduce it then. If we're going into like a new series or something, or my pastor ask for a specific song or something like that, then I'll introduce a new song. But I'm not on like this routine where I'm like, people are going to get tired if we just sing the same songs over and over again. And so that's first of all what I mean by I don't feel the need to constantly introduce new songs. But I also know that there's this tension in the worship leading space where it's like there's so much new music coming out all the time, and we listen to it and we're like, I want to do that song, and I want to do that song, and I want to do that song. Let me just tell you, it's okay to just enjoy the music and not think, I need to do this one at my church. And then you have this list of 47 songs where you're like, we want to do this one. I really heard this one that I like this week, and I heard this one I like. If you're doing it that fast, like, are you actually thinking through, Is this a song that my church needs to sing? Or I would challenge you, are you just being tossed about, blown about by every wave of doctrine? I'm trying to use biblical language here, but it's like, if I constantly feel pulled in this direction and then in this direction and then in this direction, like, I've heard the new songs. There are not that many new songs that are that good that you must introduce them. There might be like 2 or 3 per year where you're like, that would be amazing for my church. And I'm not saying like every new worship song is terrible. I'm just saying like they aren't that amazing. You know, I haven't heard a Mighty Fortress Is Our God like song written within the past year at the very least, but probably longer than that, right? Like, let's try to find those songs, introduce those to our church, and then we'll break this cycle of just constantly feeling like, oh, I'm pulled this way, and Hillsong put out this song, and Bethel put out this new album, and I need to listen to it, and Elevation just put out a song about a lion roaring, and we sing Roar 47 times. Just focus. Just focus. What does my church need to sing? The question is not, who came out with a new song this week? The question is, what does my church need to sing right now? And it might be a song from 15 years ago. I just introduced Come Behold the Wondrous Mystery by, I don't know if that's the Gettys or Matt Boswell, Matt Papa, I forget. But I just did that one, and I was like, this seems like a newer song. I forget when it was. It was not a newer song by any stretch of the imagination. But that's what my church needed to sing in that season, because we were going through this series on beholding God. We're actually kind of still in that series right now. But around Christmas time, it was about beholding God, beholding Jesus. And I was like, that's the perfect song. That's what we're going to sing. It has great theology. It highlights the focus of where we're headed as a church right now. So I'm going to pick that song. And I don't care if it came out 6 months ago or if it came out 6 years ago. That's the song we want to sing. And that brings me to the fourth reason I only sing 30 songs at my church. And that is, and I already touched on this, but I want to introduce good songs in my church, not just new songs. And I won't belabor the point because I pretty much just talked about that. But are you introducing good songs, or are you just introducing new songs? New does not mean good. Old does not mean good either, by the way. So don't think I'm saying that. I'm not saying just because a song's old that it's good. But if a song has stood the test of time throughout the ages in the church, perhaps that is a song that we should be considering more intently than a song that just made the top 100 chart last year. So don't just pick new songs, pick good songs. And I guess for you to do that, for me to do that, I have to know what a good song is. How do I know what a good song is? Well, I understand what the purpose, and hopefully you understand what the purpose of our corporate worship gatherings is and how we accomplish that through the songs that we sing. And then we take any song that we hear, we run it through that criteria in whatever facet that looks like. That's not a singular thing that we look at. There's different reasons we might introduce a new song, but it must fulfill that purpose of corporate worship. And so many worship leaders I find do not know what the purpose of corporate worship is. We're just making it up. Like, quit making it up. Go to the Bible and look at what God says he wants for his people when they gather together. And then, since your area of the service is primarily musical in nature, figure out what God's purpose for music in the corporate worship gathering is, and then pick songs to facilitate that goal of music, singing in the corporate gathering. Don't just pick songs that are new, pick songs that are good. And then I always like to talk about just this little math exercise, because I think this sheds light on how much pressure we put on ourselves to constantly pick new songs, and at the end of the day, it's really unnecessary. We think, well, if I only sing 30 songs in my church, then it's just going to be boring. Well, let me share with you a little math equation, and my brother's a math teacher, so I checked with him on this at one point, probably last year sometime. And I said, Alex, is it a permutation or is it a combination? I have no idea what those words even mean. Well, I do now because I talked to him about it. But essentially, he said, you're looking for a permutation, which stretches this number out even more, all right? And here's what I mean. I guess I should have said this up front. If you have 30 songs and you do 4 songs a week, take a guess how many different set lists you can craft out of a 30-song repertoire, picking 4 songs a week. How many 4-song set lists for your service can you create? The answer is 657,720. 657,720 different set lists. Now, just a side note, the reason I brought up permutations and combinations is because if you were just taking a combination, which wouldn't matter what order you put the songs in, then that number would be significantly lower, but still usable, where you wouldn't be singing the same set list every week. Permutations take into account the order of those songs that you pick. So you could do How Great Is Our God, Praise the Lord, the Almighty, Holy, 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 Jesus Paid It All. Or you could do Jesus Paid It All, How Great Is Our God, Praise the Lord, the Almighty, whatever the other song I said. You don't really need to know that. Just know if you have 30 songs, you can do 657,000 plus set lists. That will not be the same. And I know somebody's going to comment and be like, well, that's not actually, accurate. It's like, this is a thought exercise, right? I'm not saying that you would actually do that and only sing 30 songs for the rest of your life. But I just want you to stop feeling the pressure to introduce new songs all the time. Listen, I'm going to try to get it up to 60 songs just because I think that there's room for that. Maybe I'll stop at 45. I don't know. We'll see once I get there. And we'll cycle songs in and out maybe, but I don't even cycle that many songs in and out because I'm picking strong theological songs that I could see my church singing forever. So cutting down your worship song list can help improve your worship leading because it increases engagement in your church and it takes the pressure off of you, some of that pressure that you feel to introduce new songs every week. But paring your song list down takes some time, and that's why I want to give you a quick win right now. So check out, linked down in the description below, my free audio training, 5 tips to instantly improve your worship leading. In that free audio training, I will give you 5 tips that are really simple to do. You just have to know them and then make the effort, the conscious effort to do them this Sunday, and your worship leading will be better for it. So if you're interested in improving your worship leading, check that out down in the description below. Other than that, till I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.